My son leaned across my kitchen table and said, "Dad, you don't need a lawyer." 3 weeks later, he walked into my house and found me sitting beside two of them, with his name on every document laid out between us. That was the morning he finally realized I wasn't the helpless old man he thought I was. Before I go on, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and maybe tell me where you're listening from. Stories like this aren't easy for an old man to share, and your support truly means more than you know. I was 76 years old, living in the same small house I'd built with my own hands back in my 40s. Maple Ridge wasn't much of a town, but it had everything I ever needed: a quiet street, neighbors who still waved, and a porch where the morning sun fell just right across my coffee mug. Most mornings began the same way. I'd shuffle into the kitchen, knees popping like old floorboards, put on a fresh pot, and stand by the window while it brewed. I always cracked the window open, even in winter. My late wife, Linda, used to say the house breathed better that way. After she passed, I kept doing it out of habit and maybe out of love. I talked to her sometimes. Not out loud, just small thoughts drifting through my mind. "Coffee's too strong again, Lynn. The roses you planted are trying their best. I'm still here, still managing. I kept the house tidy, even if it took me longer these days. I mowed the lawn in pieces, front in the morning, back in the afternoon. I paid my bills on the first of every month, without fail. I wrote reminders on sticky notes, folded neatly into the corner of my desk, and I hadn't forgotten a single thing. Not yet. Not the way they assumed." My son, Gregory, used to visit with warmth in his voice. A long time ago, he'd walk through the door with stories from work, photos of the kids, or a bag of groceries he insisted I didn't need to pay him back for. But life changes people, or maybe it just shows you who they always were. I still don't know which one happened to him. His visits grew shorter, then sharper. He'd step inside without waiting, glance around like he was inspecting the walls, the cabinets, the very foundation of my life. "Dad, how long have you had that bruise? Dad, did you pay the electric bill? Dad, maybe you shouldn't be cooking on your own." None of it sounded like concern. Concern has a softness to it. His had calculation. Still, I tried to understand him. He had responsibilities: a mortgage, teenagers, stress. I wasn't looking to be anyone's burden. I worked nearly 5 decades as a machine operator at the lumber mill, 2 shifts for much of my life, so he could grow up without worry. My savings, my insurance, the house, everything I built was meant to give him a safer start. Never once did I imagine he'd someday see those things as something he was entitled to. But back then, my life still felt whole, predictable, a little lonely, yes, but steady. There were evenings when I'd sit at the kitchen table with a deck of cards, playing the old games I once taught Linda's nieces. Other times, I'd oil the hinges on the shed door the way my father taught me. Slow strokes, wipe the excess, listen for the quiet. I liked that quiet, and in that quiet, I convinced myself Gregory was just stressed. That his wife, Marissa, didn't mean to talk to me like I was drifting away from the world. She'd pat my arm and say things like, "You're doing so well for your age, Harold. You remembered your pills today? Good job. That jacket's a bit young for you, isn't it?" I brushed it off, at first, but then came the small requests. "Dad, can you help with the down payment? Dad, we need a temporary loan for the car repairs. Dad, the tuition came all at once. Could you?" Always with promises to pay me back, promises that faded as quickly as they were spoken. Still, I didn't complain. Parents give. That's what we do. But my granddaughter, Lena, she was different. She visited without wanting anything. She asked how I slept. She fixed the bird feeder without being told. She noticed things, my limp when the weather changed, the way I ran my thumb over my wedding band even though I no longer wore it. "Grandpa," she once said, "you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for." I didn't realize how much I needed those words until much later. One Tuesday afternoon, I sat on the back porch watching the birds skip along the fence line. The light was soft, the breeze slow, and for a moment I thought, this peace, this is what old age should feel like. A chance to rest, to breathe, to live the life I earned. But peace rarely announces when it's about to leave. It slips away quietly, like a shadow moving across a room. And that same quiet began settling into my house, bringing with it a feeling I couldn't yet name. But that peace was about to end. It happened on a Thursday morning. A warm one. The kind where sunlight settles across the kitchen tiles and makes everything look softer than it really is. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when the front door opened without a knock. Only two things ever entered my home that way: Gregory and the wind. And the wind, at least, had manners. "Dad?" he called, already halfway inside. Marissa followed right behind him, her perfume reaching the room before her voice did. "There you are," she said, as if I'd been hiding in my own home. I set my mug down. "You two planning to move in, or should I start locking the door again?" Gregory smiled, but there wasn't a hint of warmth behind it. "We just came to help." There it was again, help, a word that's supposed to feel gentle, but theirs always felt more like a leash. He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table, sat down, and placed a sleek navy blue folder in front of me. Marissa stayed standing, hovering behind him, studying my expression like she expected it to crack. "What's all this?" I asked. "Just some routine documents," Gregory said, voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "Things to make your life easier. My life. Easier. Funny how people claim they want to simplify your life right before they try to take control of it." Marissa tapped the folder lightly. "Nothing complicated, Harold. Just sign at the tabs. Don't overthink it." I didn't touch the folder. Not yet. I reached for my glasses, set them down, and let the pause hang between us. "What am I signing?" I asked. They exchanged a quick glance, sharp, practiced, far too familiar. "It's just legal housekeeping," Gregory said. "You don't need a lawyer for any of it." And there it was, the sentence that told me everything I needed to know. People with good intentions don't warn you away from lawyers. I opened the folder with one finger, not reading yet, just feeling the weight of it. The stack was thick, too thick for something routine. The first page had a bold title, Durable Power of Attorney. My name, Gregory's name, immediate, irrevocable. My mouth went dry. "And this one," Marissa said, flipping ahead for me, as if I couldn't read, "protects the house. Just a standard transfer of ownership to Gregory. But don't worry, you still get to live here." She said that like it was a favor. I stared at her. "Transfer? To him?" "For safety," she said lightly. "So there's no legal mess later, you know, at your age." The words hit with a quiet thud. Not loud, just heavy. I pushed the papers back toward them, calmly, firmly. "No," Gregory frowned. "Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be."
"That's so?"
I asked. "Yes," he said. "We're doing this for your protection. You forget things. You get overwhelmed. We're just stepping in before something happens." I leaned back slightly. "Sweetheart, what exactly do you think is going to happen?" Silence. A thick one. The kind that reveals more truth than any explanation ever could. He cleared his throat. "Let's not make this dramatic. Just sign, and we'll take care of the rest." I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a quiet, settled clarity. Marissa's arms crossed. "You're being stubborn. We came all this way. Let's just finish." Finish, as if my life were a checklist they needed completed. I stood, walked to the counter, and refilled my coffee. I let the moment stretch. Quiet is a powerful tool in an old man's hands. It makes impatient people reveal themselves. Gregory exhaled sharply. "Dad, please, just sign it." "No," I said again, softer this time, but more final. "Why not?" he demanded. "Because," I replied. "I read the first page." He blinked, startled. "And what's wrong with it?" Marissa snapped. I slid the page back toward them. The bold print stared up like a confession. "You're asking," I said, "to take control of everything I've built." "That's not fair," Gregory shot back. "You're twisting this." "I'm reading it," I said. "Not twisting it." Marissa's voice rose, brittle and sharp. "You're imagining things. Everyone does this eventually." "Not like this," I replied. "Not this quietly. Not this quickly." Gregory leaned forward, tapping the page with two stiff fingers, the same way he tapped bills he wanted me to pay. "Dad," he said, "don't drag this out." There was no warmth now, just urgency and entitlement. I looked at him, the boy I raised, the man he became, and the stranger sitting at my table. "Leave the folder," I said. "I'll review it later." Marissa's lips thinned. She hated losing control. "We'll come back tomorrow," she said sharply. "Please don't sign anything stupid on your own." I almost laughed. Not loudly, just a small breath of disbelief. When they left, the house felt different, heavier, as if the walls had absorbed every unspoken part of that conversation. I sat at the kitchen table, ran my fingers over the wood grain Linda once polished, and opened the folder again, line by line, clause by clause, page by page. It wasn't protection, it was erasure. And as I closed it, one thought rose in me, quiet and steady. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. That night, the house felt different. Not quieter, just heavier, as if the air itself had learned a truth it couldn't unlearn. I walked from room to room, touching the edges of familiar things. The armchair where Linda used to read her novels, the picture frames lining the hallway, the dent in the wall from when Gregory kicked a ball too hard as a boy. Back then, he laughed and apologized. Back then, he still looked at me like I could fix anything. It's strange how a lifetime can shift without warning. I made myself a cup of tea, though the taste never reached me. My hands weren't unsteady, but my breathing was all long, slow breaths, the kind you take when something sits too heavy in your chest. The papers on the table felt like a shadow stretching into every corner of the house. I tried to sleep, but the moment I closed my eyes, the scene replayed. Marissa hovering like she was waiting for me to break. Gregory tapping those papers like a man urging a signature he felt entitled to. Their voices soft but sharp, padded knives wrapped in concern. Just sign. You're overwhelmed. You don't need a lawyer. I didn't feel anger, not even betrayal. I just felt tired of pretending. Around midnight, rain began ticking against the windows. A slow, persistent rhythm. I got up, pulled on my robe, and walked into the living room. Rooms hold memories differently at night. I saw the old fireplace where Linda and I once danced, clumsy, laughing, offbeat, on our anniversary. I saw the corner where Gregory used to build towers from wooden blocks, telling me he'd grow up to be an engineer. I saw the sofa where he cried after his first heartbreak, when he still trusted me with the truth. And now? Now he stood in my kitchen trying to take control of the life I built with my own hands. When did protecting become taking? When did helping turn into pushing? When did my son start seeing me as an obstacle instead of a father? No answers came, just the dull ache that settles in when you finally acknowledge something you've been avoiding for years. Around 3 a.m., I opened the navy blue folder again. This time, I let each line sink in. Transfer of ownership. Immediate authority. Unrestricted access. My name printed over and over, as though it belonged to someone else. I closed the folder gently and whispered into the empty room, I'm still here, and I'm not done yet. Morning arrived eventually, gray and slow. I brewed my coffee carefully, each motion grounding me back into myself. My phone buzzed. A message from Gregory. Make sure you read everything. We'll sign tomorrow. Not a greeting. Not a question. Just an expectation. I set the phone down, watching the steam curl from my mug. It rose, twisted, and disappeared, a perfect picture of how they wanted my independence to fade. Around noon, the clouds finally broke. I stepped outside to check the mailbox. It was empty, but I lingered anyway, feeling the damp earth beneath my slippers. My neighbor, old Mr. Collins, waved from across the yard. You're up early, he called. I nodded. Couldn't sleep. He nodded back slowly, like he understood more than I said. Older men often do. When I stepped inside again, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror. A 76-year-old man looked back at me, silver hair, lines carved by time, a back that had carried more weight than any doctor ever measured. But my eyes were steady. Not confused, not fading, steady. I'm not done, I whispered to my reflection. Not yet. On my dresser sat a small wooden box Linda once gave me. Inside were old papers, letters, receipts, tax statements, things I kept more out of habit than sentiment. I opened it. Every document was organized, every bill paid, every detail remembered. I wasn't slipping. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was prepared, more than anyone realized. By mid-afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank notebook. I didn't intend to write much, just a few thoughts. But once the pen touched paper, everything poured out. Every time Gregory dismissed me. Every time Marissa spoke to me like a child. Every time they borrowed money without repayment. Every time I stayed quiet to avoid trouble. And now, this attempt to take everything. 3 pages filled quickly. Not bitterness, not accusation, just truth. Simple, undeniable truth. Evening crept in quietly. I warmed a bowl of soup, ate half, and set the rest aside. My appetite wasn't gone. I was simply thinking. Thinking deeply, the way an older man does when he finally stops excusing what he shouldn't have excused for so many years. As I sat there, the last of the daylight fading, one thought settled fully. If my own son could plan something this carefully, then I needed to think even more carefully. I closed the notebook, placed it beside the folder, and whispered, I began to think very carefully. The next morning arrived without fanfare, just a pale wash of light sliding across my bedroom floor. My joints ached the way they always did after a restless night, but something inside me felt sharper. Focused. As if a fog had finally lifted. I dressed slowly, choosing an old flannel shirt Linda once called my thinking shirt. I smiled at the memory. Funny how the past offers strength when the present tries to pull it away. At the kitchen table, the documents Gregory had brought sat in a neat stack, his future plan for my life, written without my consent. Beside them, I placed my notebook, the 3 pages of truth I'd written the night before. 2 versions of my future. Only one of them belonged to me. I made myself a fresh pot of coffee, poured a cup, then sat and read everything again, line by line, signature by signature. I wasn't reading as a confused old man. I was reading as someone preparing for the long game. Around 9:30, I pulled out my old address book, the real one, made of paper, not the digital folders Gregory insisted I didn't understand anymore. I flipped through the worn pages until I found the name I remembered, Cynthia Hale, a retired lawyer from church. She'd once told me, if you ever need someone trustworthy, call me first. So I did. Her voice came through steady and clear. Leo, it's been years. What's wrong? I hesitated only a second. My son's been pushing paperwork in front of me, the kind that takes more than it gives. She let out a slow breath. Come to my office today. And Leo, don't sign anything. I promised I wouldn't. By noon, the sky had darkened, the kind of quiet gray that presses on your thoughts. I drove carefully, hands tight on the wheel. I wasn't afraid, I was determined. And determination steadies a man more than youth ever did. Cynthia's office was small but warm. Books lined the walls, and the air smelled faintly of cedar. She greeted me with a firm handshake. Sit, she said. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her how Gregory walked into my home without knocking. How Marissa hovered like someone preparing to clean up a mess they hadn't even created yet. How they spoke softly while their intentions spoke loudly. Cynthia looked through every document with a practiced eye. After a moment, she muttered, This isn't caregiving, this is acquisition. I exhaled slowly. Hearing someone else name it made it real. She continued, He wants full authority, immediate, irrevocable. This isn't about helping you, Leo. It's about removing you from your own life. I nodded. I thought so. And you said he insisted you didn't need a lawyer? Yes. She closed the folder gently. Then you need 2 lawyers. I blinked. 2. One to represent you in financial protections. Another to handle the estate barriers. Gregory is planning ahead. You need to plan further. Her confidence felt like a warm light. I'll follow whatever you recommend. Good, she said. Because starting today, everything changes. We went through each step carefully. Immediate restrictions on all accounts, new passwords, verbal confirmations, and access alerts, documentation of undue pressure, a legal notice that all inquiries would be routed through counsel, a protective trust drafted quietly, without Gregory's knowledge, and finally, the part that settled deep inside me, a plan to confront him with calm, undeniable truth. Cynthia leaned forward. Leo, men like your son don't panic when they're challenged. They panic when they lose control. I nodded, and when he sees I've brought lawyers, he'll realize this isn't the story he expected to write. We scheduled the official protections for the next morning. Then she added, Let's make sure he thinks you've done nothing at all. That line felt like a slow spark in my chest. When I returned home, the light was fading. A thin strip of gold lay across the living room floor. I stood there for a moment, thinking about everything I'd survived. Loss, loneliness, the slow ache of aging. I had strength left, more than enough. At the kitchen table, I looked at the documents Gregory planned for me to sign. Then I turned to my notebook, placing it on top of them. My story, not his. I wrote a single line at the bottom of the last page. He said I didn't need a lawyer, so I brought two. I closed the notebook gently. There was no anger in me, just clarity, calm, steady clarity. The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. The next morning arrived with a thin layer of mist over the yard, the kind that makes the world feel suspended, waiting. I moved through the house with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Today wasn't about anger. It was about truth finally taking its rightful seat at the table. At 11:30 sharp, Attorney Harris arrived, calm, collected, dressed in a slate-gray suit that seemed to absorb the tension in the room. She gave me a nod. "You ready, Mr. Carver?" "I am," I said. And for once, I didn't hear doubt in my own voice. 5 minutes later, Cynthia Bloomfield walked in, carrying a leather folder with tabs marking every section Gregory hoped I'd never understand. She placed it on the table beside me, a quiet signal that I was no longer alone in any of this. We reviewed the steps one last time. What would be said? What would not be said? Where I would speak, and where silence would speak for me. At 11:57, a car door slammed outside. Then another. Gregory had brought Marissa. Of course he had. I opened the door before they could knock, letting the cold air settle between us. Gregory's eyes darted past me instantly. "Whose car is that?" he asked. "Someone here to help me understand the papers you brought," I answered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. He stepped inside, scanning the living room, then froze when he saw the lawyers seated at the dining table, documents arranged neatly in front of them.
"Dad,"
he began. "What is this?" "You told me I didn't need a lawyer," I said quietly. "So I brought two." His face tightened, shock first, then irritation, then something sharper underneath. Fear. Real fear. Marissa's smile snapped into place like a mask. "Leo, this really isn't necessary. Lawyers complicate family matters." Cynthia answered before I could. "We're here because of the family matter." Gregory cleared his throat, trying to regain ground. "Okay, Dad. Let's just go through the documents calmly. You've had plenty of time to think." "Yes," I said, sliding a different folder across the table. "I thought about these too." He looked down and saw the bank inquiry logs, dates, times, unauthorized access attempts, all laid out in black ink. His face drained. "Dad, what is this supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "you were planning things behind my back, and I found out." He tried to laugh. It came out thin. "Those were just questions. I was preparing." "For what?" I asked gently. "For my absence?" He didn't answer. Marissa stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're taking this out of context. You've been overwhelmed. Gregory has been trying to help." Harris cut in, her tone even. "Mr. Carver is fully competent. His records are current, his finances are organized, and his mental evaluations show no impairment." The room fell into a heavy silence. Gregory swallowed hard. "You did an evaluation?" "I did everything you thought I couldn't," I said. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger, a man who had stood up when he expected me to sit down. Cynthia opened the folder beside her. "These documents," she said, tapping the ones Gregory brought, "are coercive, inappropriate, and designed to transfer total authority to you, without justification." "That's not true," he snapped. "You asked him to sign away his home," she replied calmly. "His accounts, his choices, his voice." Gregory looked at me, desperation flickering across his face. "Dad, I was just trying to protect you." I met his eyes, steady. "Protect me from what? Myself?" He blinked rapidly, anger and hurt swirling in the same breath. "You think these lawyers care about you more than I do," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "I think they respect me more than you have." He recoiled as if the words had weight. Marissa folded her arms. "So what happens now?" Cynthia placed a formal notice on the table. "From this moment forward, any financial action involving Mr. Carver must go through our office. He will not be transferring his home. He will not be granting power of attorney, and he will not be pressured again." Gregory stared at the paper. "And if I refuse to accept this, then," Harris answered, "we will proceed accordingly." He looked up at me one last time. "Dad, I never thought you'd do this." "I know," I said. "That was the problem." The room grew still. the kind of stillness that doesn't ask for applause, only understanding. Gregory rose slowly, shoulders slumped, dignity slipping through his fingers. He walked toward the door with Marissa close behind him, whispering fiercely under her breath. At the doorway, he paused. "Is this really how you want things to be?" "No," I replied. "This is how they needed to be." He didn't argue again. When the door shut, it sounded final, not like loss, but like release. Cynthia and Harris exchanged small, knowing glances. "You handled that with remarkable poise," Cynthia said. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt something far quieter, something I hadn't felt since long before Gregory tried to rewrite my life with a stack of papers. I felt free. And in that silence, I finally felt steady again. The house felt different after they left. Not louder, not quieter, just honest again. As if the walls themselves had been waiting for me to reclaim my place inside them. I sat at the table for a long moment, letting the stillness settle. My hands rested on the wood, the same table where Gregory once tapped his fingers impatiently, certain he'd already won. Now it was just me, the afternoon light, and a silence that didn't hurt anymore. I kept thinking about something Cynthia said. That wasn't conflict, that was clarity. She was right. This wasn't about punishing my son. It was about protecting the part of my life he believed I had already surrendered. The truth is, aging doesn't take your voice. People just stop listening for it. Gregory told me I didn't need a lawyer, but what he really meant was that he didn't want me to have one. He didn't expect resistance. He didn't expect preparation. He didn't expect the man who changed his diapers, taught him to throw a ball, and worked 40 years to keep a roof over our heads to still be capable of standing up for himself. But I was, and I am. The trust is sealed now. My accounts are protected. My home, this place filled with memories, laughter, and the quiet imprint of the life I built, is secured on my terms, not his. And the title phrase keeps echoing in my mind. My son said I didn't need a lawyer, so I brought two. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because there comes a time in every person's life when you must guard what remains of your dignity as fiercely as you once guarded your dreams. I don't hate Gregory. I don't even resent him, but I no longer bend for him, and that, I think, is its own kind of justice. Tonight, when I go to bed, I'll sleep in a home that is still mine, a life that is still mine, a voice that is still mine. Maybe justice isn't loud or fast. Maybe it's simply being able to breathe again in peace. Would you have done the same in my shoes? Tell me in the comments, and if you'd like to hear more stories like this, I'd be grateful if you subscribed.